The Super Bowl, one of the most anticipated days of the year for sports fans. Lots of fun, frivolity, and football. But it's events like this that can harbor a dark, little discussed criminal activity, human trafficking. This hour on It's Your Call, we'll introduce you to someone who was forced into trafficking at just 8 years of age. We'll hear the impact human trafficking has had on her. Plus, we'll meet those on the front lines of the battle to end this human bondage, and it all begins right now. Human trafficking is one of the fastest growing crimes in the world, but if you think it only happens elsewhere, think again. It's happening in America, it's happening in your state, and it's happening in your town. This hour on It's Your Call, we're taking it out of the shadows and shedding some light on this very disturbing issue. Hello everyone, it's good to have you with us. I'm Lynn Doyle. I want you to take a look at some of these numbers, and if they don't leave you shaking your head, I don't know what will. According to a 2011 FBI report, there are millions of women and children enslaved in the human trafficking underworld, mostly used as sex slaves. In the U.S. alone, records indicate between 600 and 800,000 people are taken across the border into Mexico alone against their will to be trafficked. 50% of those enslaved are children and 80% are female. And speaking of children, in the U.S., current estimates say that nearly 300,000 U.S. children are at risk of becoming victims. And get this, the average age of entry into prostitution is a staggering 12 to 14 years old. Fortunately, we have people like my guest this hour who are fighting to end this human slavery and to raise public awareness of human trafficking. They include Representative Michael Fitzpatrick of Pennsylvania's 8th Congressional District, who is a member of the Congressional Victims' Rights Caucus and a leading advocate for human trafficking awareness and prevention. Also joining us is Assistant Attorney General Tracy M. Thompson, who is the chair of the New Jersey Human Trafficking Task Force. Thank you so much for being with us. I want to shed some light on this topic because I think people are at home and they are saying, oh, that's something that happens over there. And yet, Congressman, you know it happens right here every day.
When I was growing up in Bucks County in the 70s and 80s, we always looked at this issue of human trafficking, what they call modern-day slavery, as an issue for some other country, some other region of the world, Southeast Asia, somewhere other than the United States. And the fact is, it exists in the United States and has. And it exists right here in Pennsylvania and in our own communities. And so in the federal government and state and local law enforcement agencies, to a certain extent, are catching up now. But I have to say the federal government, the FBI in particular, are doing a very good job catching up with those who are involved in this huge international criminal enterprise, second only to international drug trafficking.
I heard that through the FBI report that it is the fastest growing industry, some $32 billion worth of industry, and that it's the third fastest crime internationally. That's shocking to me.
Yeah, they are shocking statistics. Again, we don't want to think that this is an issue that affects mainly women and children. 80% of the victims are women, more than half are children, and that it's happening in our community. We can do something about it, and so I've been had the opportunity to be involved in some legislation in the nation's capital, and we have folks fighting in Harrisburg and in the state capital of New Jersey as well to make sure we have a good, comprehensive, well thought out, collaborative system of laws, because this is an issue you need to work at the federal level, the state level, the local and county level, as well as working with faith-based organizations and nonprofits, which are in our community doing great jobs.
And we're taking a look there at some of the things that Congress is doing to try to battle this growing problem. We'll talk more about it in detail later in the show, but I want to turn to Tracy because it's particularly timely right now with an event like the Super Bowl coming to New Jersey. Why is it that an event like that in a venue like that ties into human trafficking?
Well, it's the commercial sexual exploitation of girls, women, children, men, and the large crowds of people and fans that the Super Bowl, a major event like the Super Bowl and other sporting events, attracts is ripe ground for traffickers to take advantage of for people who have an appetite for that party kind of overindulgence atmosphere.
Are we talking about prostitution when we talk about human trafficking, or are there other components to it?
Absolutely, other components. Strict prostitution is an agreement between a consenting man and a consenting other person, two consenting adults of age. When we talk about sex trafficking as a form of human trafficking, we're talking about three people being involved. The trafficker, who was in control of the victim, the person that is being either forced or through fraud or coercion to engage in sexual exploitation. And in the state of New Jersey, as consistent with the federal law, if you're under 18, meaning you're a minor, there need not be forced fraud or coercion. You have the inability to consent to engage in sex for money.
And we should point out that even though the Super Bowl is occurring at this time of the year, that human trafficking is something that happens every day, sadly, all around the country. It's just an event like this brings it to our attention. Now, you know, it's one thing to hear these statistics from our expert, but it's another to have experienced it firsthand. Jen Spry is a survivor of human trafficking, and she is now speaking out about it and teaches about human trafficking prevention. Jen, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity.
Why do you feel it is so important to talk about your experience and to put a face with the words human trafficking?
Really, you just said it, Lynn, is that many of us would like to believe that it's happening in a different country. And the reality is it's happening here in the United States and has been. It's just that many of us haven't noticed it, nor have they noticed what's happening in their own neighborhoods. And this crime is happening everywhere you turn. It seems like every state, every township, every city is coming up with children who are being exploited in this area and in this way.
And for you, you literally were a child when this first happened to you, just 8 years old,
Yes.
trafficked by a neighbor, someone that you knew from your community.
Absolutely. We had someone who moved in only a few doors down from our house, and the person moved in. My house was a few doors away from a church, a playground, and all the children. So the person moved in strategically right next door to a playground where children would play and a church. And that's where we would go, and that's where we met this person who began to interact and talk to the kids, and that's really where it began.
We hear so many times about men who groom children, and we think of them as pedophiles. We don't think of them sometimes in the same way as human trafficking, or in the same context as human trafficking. This man groomed you as a pedophile would, and then forced you to be with other men.
Yeah, well, okay, so we a lot of times think of, you know, just like you were saying, a pedophile and a trafficker. I hate to combine the two, but really they're one and the same, in the sense that what is pedophilia? And that is sexually exploiting a child, an adult, and that is what a trafficker does. So this person basically got coercion, forcing, and lots of threats. And after some time, before I even knew it, as a child at 8 and 9 years old, I didn't even know what was happening. I was too scared and threatened to even say anything about it. But after some time, yes, I was forced into pornography, which is prostituting a child. But what's so scary is that it wasn't just children being prostituted with different men. I was forced children on children. It was children with adults. There was drugs involved. We're talking about 8-year-old children. I wasn't alone. There were several kids from my neighborhood and several children I didn't even know. But the crime was very deviant in nature. So
it is deviant, and I'm sure when people are hearing it at home, they're just shocked that this could happen to our most gullible, most innocent citizens in this country. 8 years old, you heard her say there was a series of coercions and threats. Does it happen because people are afraid? They're afraid to tell. They don't know to whom to turn. They don't know that anyone will believe them, just like other sexual assaults?
Absolutely. It's a trauma bond forms. They may even fall in love with the trafficker. They may even consider themselves boyfriend and girlfriend, or a dating situation. Again, as I said earlier, you don't need to have forced fraud or coercion when you're talking about a minor, but that's today's law.
This is why Congress has stood up and taken notice? Because when you hear a story like Jen's about being 8 years old and being forced to do the deviant things that she was forced, we're going to look to our lawmakers to say, what can we do to stop this?
And we should. And the role of government, first and foremost, is to protect those who cannot stand for and protect themselves. And so it's entirely appropriate, with all the things the federal government does, involved in so many different aspects of our lives, we need to pay attention to this issue. This is an issue in our communities and in our country, and right in front of us, and right at these major events, as you let off the show talking about the Super Bowl coming up. And if the federal government cannot properly allocate enough resources to our law enforcement agencies and prosecutors' offices so they can protect the most vulnerable potential victims, individuals, children, and women in our communities, then we're not doing our job. We need to do more.
Well, we're glad that you're out there doing it for us. We have to take a quick break, but as we do, we want to know what you think about this issue. Were you aware of just how prevalent human trafficking has become, or would you count yourself among the majority of Americans who don't even realize it exists? And do you know someone who is possibly at risk? Would you know the warning signs? If you have questions or comments, you can email me directly during the break. I'm at lynn@lynndoyle.net. You can also find us on Facebook, and you can follow me on Twitter. We'll be back with some of your questions and more story right after this.
The church working, anybody would have noticed, maybe questioned it?
Right.
Maybe with some of us.
That's the kind of story I want you to tell. That's what we're going to talk about next.
Here and just pop it out. Scoot back towards him a little bit.
I'm sorry. Oh.
30
Yes.
seconds.
It's fine. Okay. According to a 2011 FBI report on human trafficking, current estimates say nearly 300,000 U.S. children are at risk of becoming victims, and that the average age of entry into prostitution is a staggering 12 to 14 years old. Yes, I know I said that earlier in the show, but it is so important. I wanted to repeat it to you so that these numbers stick in your head. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Lynn Doyle. This is It's Your Call, where we are talking about human trafficking. It's a dangerous time of the year, especially when there are big events like the Super Bowl, but it's dangerous any time of the year if kids, women, even men are at risk. In this next segment, we're going to talk about who is at risk and what you should be on the lookout for. I want to bring in another guest here. Dan Emmer is the Executive Director of Worthwhile Wear. That's an organization focused on reaching and restoring women affected by this human trafficking, both internationally and domestically. Dan, thanks for joining the discussion.
Thank you, Lynn. I'm glad to be here.
How often do you see women who have been trafficked, and what kind of impact does it have on their lives?
Well, trafficking is one of those things that it's gaining more traction, a little more light in the spotlight. And we did a lot of work internationally, but started to see the head kind of raised here in the U.S. more and more. And it's really affecting women. We had this story here from Jen sharing that it affects them emotionally, and it's something that takes a while for them to recover from. And that's one of the issues that we're addressing right now, that long-term need to recover.
And what does your organization do toward that end?
Yes, well, Worthwhile Aware, we started actually overseas, as Congressman Fitzpatrick mentioned, that we used to think it was something that was far away, something not in our own backyard, but it turns out it's here. So we took our focus not away from the overseas issue, but added a solution which is here, which is a long-term solution, providing housing and aftercare. And that's done in collaboration as well. As you've done here, pulled in a lot of different voices. We're pulling a network of organizations that are working together to respond to this in a comprehensive way.
Jen was good about sharing her personal story with us, and I think it hits home with people at home when they can put a face with an issue. Can you describe for us the impact that what happened to you had on your life, not just when you were 8 years old, but the impact it continues to have today?
Sure. Okay, so when something like that happens, a child is so traumatized. Like, I worked with rescue and restoration, and when I look at those children, yes, it's so important to do that, and thank God for people like Dan and his organization who do that, but I look at the road of recovery that those children have to go down. I myself had several surgeries on my insides, on my reproductive parts. I've had many years of counseling and therapy trying to work through this, but I think what took the heaviest toll was that it was a secret. It was a family secret because I just didn't even, you don't think that children can keep secrets, but I kept a secret, and even people in my neighborhood kept this a secret too. To this day, it's still their secret.
That's one of the questions that's come forward from our Facebook followers, and they've asked if at 8, 9, 10 years old, how it was that your family didn't put 2 and 2 together that you were being victimized. Can you explain that for us?
I can from my own perspective, but really what I keep finding it's the same case. I fit into what we consider statistics. It happened in my neighborhood. It happened between 3 and 6 o'clock. A lot of people think that that's a safe time for children. But going from the bus stop, which was 2 doors away from my house, to a neighbor moving in, which was 4 doors away, where my mother can call my name and I would come home for dinner or call home for anytime she wanted me. But it was still happening right there under everyone's nose. With something so blatant, it became, the secret was encompassing, like to the point where I couldn't go home and tell my mother because it was happening right there. I would go to the bus stop and the guy would be in the car. I mean, we had a crossing guard. He would sit across the street and tell me, he'd be sitting there looking at me from the bus stop where I was scared to death. He would tell me what my little, he threatened me that he would kidnap my little sister and kill my mother if I ever told. So I kept that secret. We see stories like this. We see stories nationally like this. We learned of the women who were held against their will in Cleveland. We heard about the J.C. Dugar story. We've heard about Elizabeth Smart. These men, typically they are men, find a way to just enslave these people and make them believe that there's no one out there that can help them. It just breaks your heart.
And there are people out there to help. So as Jen said, it is happening right in front of us, right under our noses, right in our communities. And so up in Bucks County, the community where I live and where I represent, I was so grateful that, because I was involved in this issue in Washington and coming back and talking to Rotary clubs and groups in Bucks County, to meet Dan up at the Calvary Church up in Souderton, Upper Bucks County, to hear that Calvary Church was involved, that his organization was inculcated in this church, raising money, raising awareness. And we actually met at a roundtable discussion to figure out how can our community, our local community, be more involved to help the individuals in the recovery process. And so, that's how these issues take root. That's how organizations start. And they begin to serve a community, which is, you're doing a great job, Dan, in that.
And that's really the only way that it can be answered. Is it's not one organization, it's not one person, it's a collective. It's the local government, the government side, the organizations, the coalitions, really giving that full response. Otherwise, it's not going to be sufficient to answer the issue.
To have an organization like yours to help with the recovery and to have Congress aware of this issue and trying to pass legislation so it's a cohesive approach to the problem is great. Let's talk about how we could prevent this. Jen pointed out some things about the dangerous time of day. Maybe we should talk about what we as members of the community could be looking for. How should we know if someone's at risk or if there's behavior that we should be suspicious of? Are you able to do that for us?
Well, absolutely. Before I get to that, I just want to piggyback. The whole concept behind the New Jersey Human Trafficking Task Force is a collaborative approach. It's not just law enforcement. It's not just state government agencies. It's non-governmental organizations, victim service providers to assist us in developing these policies and rescuing and saving these girls, women, and children. In terms of the signs that the community can look for changes in behavior. Look for items that the children or young adults may have recently acquired that they cannot afford to pay on their own. Look for a change in their schedule. Pay attention if there's now an increased drug use or drinking or hanging out with an older adult. They have a new boyfriend, those types of things.
I want to share some stories with you because we've gotten some comments from our viewers, and I think that hearing them, they obviously did not want to come on camera, but hearing these stories might reiterate to you how serious this problem is. This one says, I was tricked into coming to America when I replied to a job ad in my newspaper. I worked in financing. I saw this as a good opportunity to come to America for work. When I arrived, I was greeted at the airport by someone I didn't know, and all my documents were taken from me. I then realized what was happening, but it was too late.
I know her.
You know her. She's probably, it may say Ava, but it could probably apply to thousands of women.
That story is so common, and we've actually worked with a victim, had her come and speak, who has that same story. It's tragic.
It is tragic. This one says, I was 13 when my mom's boyfriend started to pimp me out. He prepared my body so that I would be able to have sex with older men, and my mother did nothing about it. What do you say to a young girl like that who's being prepared for trafficking and she really truly feels that there's no one in her corner? Her mom wasn't helping her.
I mean, obviously there are many individuals involved in that particular issue. You have the child victim, you have a mother, you've got the mother's boyfriend. It is important that our young adults, teenagers, and preteens understand that the law enforcement is on their side, that there are programs available that they can come to.
They have to go to the school guidance counselor, a priest, a minister, a neighbor, someone.
And at the same time, in the emergency rooms in the schools, individuals are trained on recognizing the symptoms and making the reports, which is required.
Okay, on that note, I have to take a quick break, but we have some more important information coming up, so please stay with us. Thanks for joining us once again. I'm Lynn Doyle. This is It's Your Call. Our topic is human trafficking. If you think that that's an issue that happens someplace else in the world, I want you to stop and think again. It's happening right here, right now in your community, and we need you to be aware of it. Congressman Fitzpatrick has made it a priority to get the word out. How important a role can the public play in human trafficking?
Well, they're critical. If you see something, you have to say something. I want my constituents to know just this week my office was meeting with the Bucks Coalition Against Trafficking, which is engaged in this issue, and we're there to help.
And in terms of large events like the Super Bowl, which this year happily is happening in New Jersey, but elsewhere around the country, what advice would you give for people to look and be aware?
Absolutely. If you feel like you are being exploited sexually or otherwise, or know someone who is being exploited, call the hotline. There's a national hotline, but New Jersey also has a state hotline 24/7, 1-855-END-NJHT. There's help.
Would you repeat that for us again?
Yes, 1-855-END-NJHT.
Okay, and it's not just in New Jersey, it is happening everywhere, and fortunately we have organizations like Dan Emmer's Worthwhile Wear. What can the general public do in terms of supporting you and providing resources?
Well, we have the program, the local program, which is the long-term housing. Currently, one of the hardest things for a nonprofit is profits or funding. So we're looking for that, but also we're looking, you know, as glad as we are to provide a solution, but prevention would be so much better if the community is willing to look and look for the signs.
Okay, and on that note, I want to go to Jen, talk about prevention. In your case, you think if a neighbor had just paid closer attention, the course of your life may have been different. Can one person really make a difference?
And that's just it. That's what our whole message here is today. That it's not just a national level, that it is going down to that one single person. If the caregiver or the guardians in the home don't know that's going on, whether they know or don't know, a neighbor could be the person who could stand up for that child and be the voice of someone who doesn't have a voice.
If you see someone who's living alone, who hangs around children, who doesn't have children, who's on the edge of the park, just like we would tell our kids to be careful of sexual predators, maybe now we need to add human traffickers in our consciousness.
We also need to think that it's not just a matter of kidnapping. You know, in my case, no one ever came looking for me because I never went missing.
Okay. Well, you have tried to turn your life around and are doing a successful job of helping others become survivors and hopefully not become victims in the first place. So Jen, thank you so much. You were so brave. I appreciate it. Congressman, thank you for being on the front lines of the battle. Tracy, you as well, and Dan, thank you. If you have questions or comments for any of our guests, please email me at lynn@lynndoyle.net and we'll make sure that we forward them on. Thank you for watching. See you next time.